The War on Terror, also known as the Global War on Terrorism and the United States War on Terror, is a phrase that relates to the United States government's ongoing international military effort initiated in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. The campaign's primary targets are extremist groups operating across the Muslim world, with Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and their many franchise groups being the most prominent. What does this war now look like after Afghanistan? Let us find out. A brief reminder about what the War on Terror used to be. The campaign's name is a metaphor for war, and it refers to a wide range of operations that do not constitute a regular battle. On September 16, 2001, U.S. President George W. Bush used the term War on Terrorism for the first time, followed by War on Terror in a formal speech to Congress a few days later. "Our opponent is a radical network of terrorists in every nation that supports them," President Bush said in the second speech. The term was coined with a focus on Al-Qaeda-affiliated countries at the time. Experts like Richard B. Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, quickly attacked the term, and the Bush administration began to use more nuanced terms to publicly identify the U.S.-led international operation. A Global War on Terrorism Service Medal was issued, albeit it was never utilized to formally identify U.S. actions in internal government paperwork. President Barack Obama, whose administration had tried to avoid using the term since taking office, declared the Global War on Terror to be over on May 23, 2013, saying that the military and intelligence agencies would no longer wage war against a tactic, but rather on a specific group of networks determined to destroy the United States. The Obama administration, which preferred the term Overseas Contingency Operation, announced the end of the U.S.-led mission in Afghanistan's combat role on December 28, 2014. However, the United States continued to play a major role in the Afghan war, and in 2017, U.S. President Donald Trump expanded the American military presence in Afghanistan. The development of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, prompted the launch of Operation Inherent Resolve, a global operation to degrade and destroy ISIL. The morality, efficiency, and expense of the fight on terror have all been questioned. According to a study published in 2021 by the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, the United States' post-9/11 wars on terror had displaced 38 million people in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, and the Philippines, with 26.7 million returning home. The study estimated these wars caused the deaths of 897,000 to 929,000 people, including over 364,000 civilians, and cost $8 trillion. The concept of a war on terror has been controversial, with critics alleging that it has been used to curtail civil liberties and violate human rights, such as controversial U.S. actions such as surveillance, torture, and extraordinary rendition, as well as drone strikes that killed suspected terrorists and civilians. Other countries, such as the 54 countries involved in CIA black sites, or those who assisted with drone strikes, backed many of these activities. Critics accuse participating governments of using the war on terror to repress minorities or domestic sideline opponents, and have criticized negative impacts to health and the environment resulting from the war on terror. Critics argue that the term war is inappropriate in this context, much like the term war on drugs, because terror is not a recognizable enemy, and international terrorism is unlikely to be eradicated through military methods. What the U.S. war on terror looks like after Afghanistan. It's possible to catch a glimpse of America's never-ending fight on terrorism in a distant corner of eastern Africa, behind levels of razor wire and concrete blast barriers. Camp Lemonnier, a 550-acre military installation, is home to U.S. Special Operations personnel tasked with combating Al-Qaeda's formidable affiliates around the world. The installation, which sprawls across miles of sun-scorched desert and volcanic rock inside the tiny country of Djibouti, resembles a sand-colored prison stronghold, according to the personnel stationed there. Inside, two subcamps are separated by 20-foot gates encircled by razor wire. The commando squads emerge from the shadows and board lumbering cargo jets bound for Djibouti's southern border with Somalia for episodic battles with local troops fighting Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda's largest offshoot. It's like commuting to work, according to General Stephen Townsend, Chief of Military Operations in Africa. The effort has been called Operation Octave Quartz by the Pentagon. The operation could be a preview of what's to come. Despite President Joe Biden's promises to terminate America's long wars, he has no plans to withdraw from international counterterrorism activities. 1 month after his tumultuous Afghan withdrawal, Biden is carrying on the work of his predecessors, scaling down high-profile military deployments while maintaining heavily armed, highly involved counterterrorism task groups in troubled areas. The president said he plans to battle terrorism from beyond the horizon, sending in special forces using drones and intercepted intelligence, and training international partners. Some 2,500 U.S. troops operate from locations across Iraq, about 1,500 miles northeast of Le Monnier, where they are constantly attacked with rockets and mortars. In Syria, an additional 900 troops are stationed within striking distance of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. In a letter to Congress dated June 8th, Biden identified a dozen countries, ranging from Niger to the Philippines, where American troops were engaged in counterterrorism operations. These missions are carried out by 50,000 men and women on the front lines of an ongoing, underreported battle, primarily in the Middle East and Africa. The extent to which Biden should invest in what was formerly known as the global war on terror has been a point of contention within the administration. His national security staff is working on a new counterterrorism policy, which will determine the size of the U.S.'s global force deployment. Most lethal drone strikes have already been paused, with commanders being ordered to confer with the White House before striking, and a review of when such lethal force should be employed has begun. At home, he's beefed up counterterrorism investigations into violent domestic extremists, whom the FBI ranks as the single greatest threat to the homeland after the attempted insurgency at the Capitol on January 6th. America's war in Afghanistan is over, but in the Horn of Africa, its war on terror rages on. The United States' shifting stance is a watershed moment for the country and the world. Critics of the United States' foreign military intervention argue that the country should abandon shadow wars entirely, claiming that they can never be won. The resulting civilian losses and other expenses create a self-sustaining global conflict. However, a complete withdrawal would be dangerous. Military leaders in the United States are concerned that their haphazard exit from Afghanistan and a new, weaker approach to combating terrorism globally could put Americans and their allies in danger. General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told Congress on September 28 that a reformed Al-Qaeda or ISIS with aspirations to strike the United States is a very real prospect. Strategic choices have strategic ramifications. Biden is banking that a low-key global struggle, with all the collateral damage that entails, would be politically acceptable enough for Congress to continue supporting, as well as effective enough to preclude existing and emerging militant groups from posing a threat to the United States. The concept is already being put to the test every day at Camp Le Monnier, the U.S. military's only permanent installation on the African continent. 20 years after the terrorist attacks of September 2001, the so-called war on terror shows no sign of winding down. It waxes and wanes, largely in the shadows and out of the headlines. Less an epical clash than a low-grade condition, one that flares up occasionally, as in 2017, when Islamic State militants ambushed American and local soldiers outside a village in Niger, killing 4 Americans. It's tough to assess the conflict since it's inextricably linked to the twin disasters in Afghanistan and Iraq. In those countries, the U.S. went beyond counterterrorism methods to embark on a more ambitious, doomed endeavor to transform broken tribal civilizations into American-style democracies. The counterterrorism campaign, which is largely conducted in secret, defies such measures. It's becoming more and more common to work with others. Large portions of it take place in far-flung locations like the Sahel or the Horn of Africa. For the most part, American casualties are low, and success is defined not by taking capital or eliminating an enemy's army, but by dismantling groups before they can attack the American homeland or overseas assets such as embassies and military bases. Achievements so far. The war on terror can only be assessed as relatively successful inside the Western world, more within the United States than with respect to Western Europe as a whole, said Fernando Renares, the director of the Program on Violent Radicalization and Global Terrorism at the Elcano Royal Institute in Madrid. Still, in comparison to the comprehensive failures in Iraq and Afghanistan, the other war on terror has so far achieved its bedrock goal of protecting the United States from another 9/11 type attack. At what cost has this campaign been realized? The United States has lost moral authority worldwide due to its war crimes and excesses, which range from torture to drone killings. Its occupying armies fostered a new generation of Qaeda affiliates, while the Islamic State's black-clad soldiers flooded into the vacuum left in Iraq by departing American troops. And the cost of a massive counterterrorism effort has been enormous, fueling military spending long after heavy combat in Afghanistan and Iraq ceased. Will the United States be able to sustain this colossal expense in an era where Mr. Biden is trying to recalibrate American foreign policy to tackle new challenges, like climate change, pandemics, and the great power rivalry with China? A new kind of warfare. Few presidents have given a more clear description of this new sort of warfare than Barack Obama. who spoke to the United States Military Academy's cadet graduates in 2014. He said the graduates would no longer be required to fight in misguided wars, but they would have to deal with a web of terrorist threats stretching from the Middle East to Africa. Mr. Obama told a somber crowd on a cold morning, "We have to develop a strategy that matches this diverse threat, one that widens our reach without stretching our troops too thin or stirring up local resentments. To battle terrorists alongside us, we need partners." In summary, despite talk of withdrawals and homecomings, the war on terror continues to observe tragic anniversaries year after year. Hundreds of troops stood in the windless heat of Camp Lemonnier on September 11, 2021, to commemorate the 9/11 attacks. Even though it wasn't quite 9 a.m., the temperature had already surpassed 104 degrees. Sweat started to form rings on the bands of the troops' camouflage headgear. Many of these servicemen were toddlers 20 years ago. Some people were not born. However, the attacks took them to a country that few could have identified on a map before they were sent. After the attacks, things altered dramatically and irreversibly, Major General Zana informs the troops. "Without you, none of us would be here. None of this would be here if not for the street, this building, the planes that flew overhead, and the friendships we built." As an American flag is slowly lowered to half-staff, the troops salute in unison. Conclusion. Talking about shifting positions from the Obama perspective, Mr. Biden was present at creating the war on terror. In January 2002, weeks after the United States ousted the Taliban, he became the highest-ranking American politician to visit the battlefield. After touring a bombed-out Kabul, he said the United States should join a multinational military force to restore order. We still don't know what that means yet. However, the troops fighting after the war in Afghanistan are still lurking in the shadows at war.